I just absolutely adore you. Solutions. Oh,
Problem solver.
yes, that's the way to be. Hey.
Yeah.
All right. So let's delve into this integrity with self first. There's so much potency and palpability and strength in that, like that I feel come into my being and my vessel and my heart when we even just say integrity with self. So I'd love to hear from your lens of perception what that represents to you and how you experience it.
Yeah, totally. So we've started.
Yeah.
Even that, just like being clear on what the container is, matters for me.
Yes.
And not just here, like everywhere. So integrity with self. The reason why I ask, have we started yet? Because we talked about this a little bit before hitting record. It's been coming up a lot lately where people are trying to force themselves into loving themselves, because that's become a big thing. Right? Self-love practices and self-love workshops. And I think it's beautiful. I don't mean to be mocking as I use a mocking voice. What I am highlighting, though, is how a lot of people aren't keeping their word to themselves. A lot of people aren't doing what they would expect in any kind of relationship from anyone else. And so if you have a project, are you doing it on time? Are you showing up to do that work? If you say you want to work out regularly, are you doing that? If you say you want to go to sleep at a certain time, are you doing that? Are you drinking enough water? I play a drinking game where when I talk about hydration, I drink. And so, like, it can be little things, but I think it really matters. And so what we were talking about before was that if someone exterior to ourselves were not, like if they were breaking their word repeatedly, right? In little ways, big ways, would we tolerate it? And both of us, it's kind of a no.
Right.
Or maybe definitely a no.
It's solid no.
Yeah, kind of. I'm Canadian. I'm trying to be all nice about it. It'd be a no. And yet we don't have, we can't eject ourselves, right? We won't go too dark with this. So we're stuck with ourselves inside of like this lifetime relationship. But why tolerate poor treatment?
Correct.
Right? And how can we love ourselves if we're not acting with respect? I think there's tears.
Yes. And this is profound. So this energetic, as I have been delving into this lush terrain within my own being, there's a profound capacity that we have as the architects of our world to shift the dynamic of the mirror internally with this. And so what that looks like for me is, if the first question that I ask is, if somebody in my life, and this usually always arises in our, our most intimate connections, is not keeping their word to me or valuing fully my time, energy, presence, any of this, my immediate inquiry is, where am I not keeping my word to me? Where am I not fully valuing my own time, energy, presence? And so then I go into a space of deeper inquiry around, okay, what is, then the questions are, what is me, what are my commitments and my devotions to self? What are the priorities? What is meaningful to me? What is valuable to me? What is important to me? And creating a very clear, we could start with writing it down in a journal, but it becomes an internal knowing, to self-intimacy, to know thyself. This is what is valuable to me. This is what is important to me. And first and foremost, I am going to devote to giving those things to myself. And I am not going to waver from that. I'm going to be impeccable with my word to myself. And as I do that with precision, the beings in my life show up for me in an entirely different way, without me having to do anything external to myself to create that shift. Although there's still a beauty and a brilliancy that I find in even having dialogue around it with those unique beings in our life, because it also allows them to open into a greater awareness of their own self and where they may or may not fully be showing up for themselves and therefore for others. So there's a potency to that, because it's beyond exactly what you said, self-love and self-care and all of this. It is unwavering, impeccable devotion to the self and such an intimacy and commitment to living in accordance with our own heart and our own standards, and embodying our own standards and desires, that which we wish for the world to give to us, to become that.
So I'm just feeling into everything that you're sharing there. Parts of it I agree with 100%, and parts of it I'm catching my own projections, right? And so it's interesting. The beginning part is a personal red flag of mine, and I'll explain. When other people aren't holding up a certain standard or level of behavior, I do like to check in and say, like, okay, where am I doing that? How's that showing up in me? But what I've realized that sometimes the lesson is I need to just say, no, they don't belong, right? And so for years, I was like, I just need to work harder, and that didn't work. So that's just like my stuff from my past. But I love the piece about checking in, where we're not being like who we want to be, essentially, and then being impeccable with that relationship, or challenging ourselves to be.
Can we freeze and focalize that for a minute? Because I think there's a gem of wisdom in there that also wants to be birthed. Because now we're getting into what I would consider to be, because I consider us all family, so we're getting into the artistry of loving and strong firm communication, where sometimes the invitation is, okay, I am living in accordance with myself. I am in integrity with me. And this is showing up out here. So then the invitation is to vocalize our truth in love and provide a greater opportunity for others to rise.
Yeah, so I don't know who said it first, but I've heard my friends Preston Smile say it, like, and Adam Roa, that they've all kind of said, love is unconditional, relationships aren't.
Yeah.
and so this is the piece that I'm sort of bumping into, is I had to learn how to say, whether it's my projections or not, no. and there was a stage where I was trying to own it all. Right? Everything that's showing up is me. And sometimes being responsible was saying no, just full on no. Even if that was me, like, making someone else wrong, and even if I was wrong for doing that. And so I think that's one piece that I was reacting to, that initial bit. So I think responsibility had to shift for me from being the source of everything to sometimes being, well, the source of everything says, am I tolerating behavior that shouldn't be tolerated?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It might not be my projection. They might be being really crappy. And so,
yeah. This is. I feel like this is very valuable.
Thank you.
Yes.
You said so many things, and I got hooked on this one bit. So
this is
I keep catching myself.
Because it's important, and I feel like
It cost me years of my life.
Yeah.
It cost me years of my life trying really hard to be good. And sometimes, this is another thing Preston says, what would love do? And
Yes.
sometimes love would say, get out.
I mean, in my experience, what I have experienced in these dynamics in my containers, because I actually recently let go of a core relationship in my life of many years that was extraordinarily valuable to me. I sat with it. I meditated on it. I reflected. I deeply self-reflected. I reflected with objective, neutral awareness on the total dynamics of the container. And I said, my exact words were, out of self-respect, I will not tolerate this in my life. These are my standards. And the way that I communicated in that dialogue was, this is what I'm recognizing. This is not in resonance with my evolutionary expansion in life path. And if there is a true, sincere desire to be in union, in connection with one another, then these are the standards, the preferences, the conditions of my containers. And so then here's the choice. If you would like to still share this odyssey with me, these are the standards, these are the conditions. And I feel as though that's very valuable to bring forth, and then that being self-selected out of my experience. And so that was a beautiful and clear indicator of where they were on their journey, which was perfect and beautiful for them. And we just orbited in different directions, which of course created new openings for each of us in unique ways. And so in this is a deep maturation of soul. I find being able to have these dialogues, and there is, and I resonate with you on that too, the taking full accountability and responsibility. But at a certain point in our journey, when we begin to cooperate as a collective unit, it just requires precision awareness of what's unfolding throughout the total dynamics, so that we can have these conversations and support one another with the deepening into integrity.
I absolutely love it. And I love the maturity that it seems like both of you handled that with. But I think it starts with you keeping your word to yourself.
Right.
Right. So just to keep to the theme, because if you weren't clear on what your divine purpose is, your path, then it's easy to be pulled off of it. And that's not so bad. Narrative can play out. But if you're like, no, this is who I am, what I'm doing, who I'm being, yeah, of course there's room to play inside of that, but pretty much here. And anything outside of here, no. Because you had that clarity, you were able to take that action. I really want to applaud you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I just want to go right here. This wise, majestic facet of my being, my heart, had that clarity. And so, this is the deep invitation to explore the truth of our heart and to ferociously, devoutly uphold that, and to trust its directionality. I mean, the rich truth of our heart. And this is, for me, it's a shift even in the creative landscape from what we can see, and we do see often in the spiritual community, is just being a leaf on the wind, to being a fortress and a lighthouse and a beacon of divine artisanal craftsmanship, where we are precisely architecting the creation that we desire. And it really is a depth of embodiment, and it calls us into these subtle, nuanced facets of awareness and self-awareness and full scope, full spectrum, 360-degree awareness and presence, ultimately. I mean, elucidated presence, where we are in a space of internal integrity, which is another way in my experience to say synergy or harmony. And we're observant, we're aware of what is actually arising and presenting itself both within ourselves and within the dynamics of our environment and our relationships. And we can take actions from that space of awareness, and we're not disconnected and just floating about.
What I love about conversations like this is that it allows for different layers and different depths to the topic, right? And so initially, I gave one understanding of what I talk about in terms of integrity. But you talked about synergy, talking about your heart. Something that really moves me is this idea of being aligned mind, heart, gut, groin, and spirit. So 5 different spaces. And can we be a yes in each one? Right? So I talk about a full yes life. I talk about unlocking the divine inside of us that I call the God spark. And I think, like, what I want for the world is everyone living from their God spark, that uniqueness that that I think we know when it's there. It's not always the easiest to describe, but I think when we connect to the divine, we feel it. And so, being in integrity, it's not checking off some list, right? So I talked about being on time for things and working out when we say we're going to work out, and going to sleep when we say we're going to go to sleep. But it's, am I being who I'm here to be? Right? Marianne Williamson says we're here to make manifest the glory of God that's inside of us. It's not just in some of us, it's in all of us. And as we give ourselves permission to be, we unconsciously give others permission to do so as well. Right? Like, that fits this God spark concept of mine so closely. And so for me, integrity of self is around that. Right? Am I being that?
One, I love when you riff on Marianne Williamson. It's so good every time. I love it. And then what I'm feeling is the potency in the laser lucid clarity of the yes, and an invitation. Our body is our most powerful psychic tool. So if we're not feeling that clarity, that's the wisdom of our body compass alerting us something isn't in full congruence for you. What is that thing? And then observing the facets of our inner world and our life to see where we're not in that laser lucid yes, and coming back into accord with our truth, no matter what it means. And in my experience, that has created such a depth of bravery and audacity and true courage and true empowerment, where it's like, I love my soul and my heart so much. I'm not willing to settle or sacrifice for anything, even if it's the thing that I feel like is the prized jewel. It doesn't matter. I have stepped outside of situations that by all means looked like the most grand Epicurean experiences and opportunities. And I have just flat out said no, because it is not worth the integrity and the full embodiment of my own divine source self power and my own devotional, we're talking real love, devotional love and honor and respect and value for myself. And it has always been the most maximal choice that I could have made for numerous reasons. And so it's even having the courage to trust that, even when the creation or the opportunity that's presenting itself has all the bells and the whistles and the things that we think we might be desiring. But what we actually gain is that integrity and the solidity of that and the fulfillment and enrichment of that. And that's, those are the spiritual wealth that is worth far more than, the things that sometimes represent in the physical.
How did you say it? Did you say soul self?
Soul self,
source self. It's just such a beautiful concept. And I talked earlier about loving ourselves and how it's hard when we're not keeping our word to ourselves. Right? It's hard to feel love that way. And so people wonder why they feel bad. They wonder why their self-esteem might And yet, if we're not keeping our word to ourselves, if we're not saying, okay, above all else, right? I don't know whether we were recording already when you quoted the Oracle of Delphi, but to that, like above, or that's not the Oracle, know thyself.
Yes.
Yeah, I was about to quote Polonius. This above all else, to thine own self be true.
Yes.
Right? That idea is lovely, but even that brings questions for me of which version of myself am I going to honor today?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so one of the things we said we might talk about are standards, right? And so I wrote something, I don't know, within the last month. It said, if you're struggling with boundaries, try calling them standards and set those instead.
Yeah.
Right. And so I loved hearing you talk about setting standards. And yeah, you look like you're ready to go off of the things that I said. So
I'm listening. I'm just celebrating you internally.
Oh, I love it. I can keep talking forever, but I want to hear what you have to say to some of that.
Yes. Standards to me, boundaries in my experience are self-imposed imaginal constructs of limitation where I say, life can only come this close to me because I have created an invisible border. And it coheres with the notion of what we resist persists. So with a boundary, we're holding something off from ourselves, which actually invites it closer. We have to construct more and more boundaries in an attempt to keep that thing at bay. And we also limit.
Can you explain that?
Yes.
How does it call it closer?
So if I am creating a wall,
right?
So my field is only opened as far as I have into the greatest expanse of wherever I have constructed that wall to be. So it's like a ceiling, a glass ceiling of sorts, where I have said, okay, this is where my wall is, and nothing outside of this wall can get in. But with that, I also limit my own capacity to welcome in love and all things that exist beyond that wall. So that is how I experience boundaries, these invisible walls of separation. So it's a word that's coming through, so to speak. So here's my boundary, here's my wall. Nothing can come past this wall that does not adhere to these specific conditions and requirements, but also then nothing can get in past those walls. So it creates a duality, and because it's there, because I'm not expanded into the fullness of love that I am, however far it is that I'm open into, that is, I'm actually inviting that thing closer to me. So that's how I experience that energetic. And with standards, what it feels like is a potent clarifier. This is the standard, and first and foremost, I'm going to be sure that I'm embodying the standard that I'm setting. So then there's the inquiry and the check-in with self. Okay, these are all the standards. Am I embodying all of this? So that's first. And then a standard to me is an invitation to expand, to evolve, to rise for all of the beings in my life. This is the standard, and I invite you into this space. But there's not a closing off, a pushing out, a setting up of an imaginal wall that restricts myself and my creation and actually invites more of that thing into me, because what we resist persists. So if I create that, it's just going to keep showing up, and then I have to create more and more boundaries in an attempt to keep that thing out of my experience. To me, it's inefficient and ineffective to create boundaries in the way that we often define them. Standards, however, are an invitation for myself and for all the beings in my life.
So I have a slightly different take on boundaries, but I hear you. And I do think, as you said, the way that they're normally constructed, the focus is on completely what a person doesn't like that they want to keep out. Mm-hmm. So, as you say, what we resist persists. What we focus on is what manifests. right? The classic "don't think of pink elephants" thing. As we try not to look at something, that's all that's there. And yeah, whenever I work with people and we're working on goal setting, there are goals that say, well, I don't want to be fat anymore. I don't want to be poor anymore. Well, all that they're focusing on are the things that they don't like.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that boundaries have to be that, but they often are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of the same thing. But yeah, like where I am right now, there's 2 giant dogs asleep on the floor. And I think of boundaries more like that. They're the sweetest creatures, but if you don't belong here, they know it. and they'll chase you out. And I think that there's something beautiful about that. I have a wolf tattooed on my arm, and it sort of represents that. So maybe I'm a little attached to it.
Yes.
Either way, standards I think are important. And one of the things that fascinates me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on, is this idea of unconditional love versus setting and holding a standard.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it can occur as you're doing something wrong to people if they're not meeting the standard.
Mm-hmm.
Almost no matter how it's presented, it can land like that. And again, in my past, I would bend and contort and try to make it super nicey nice so the person wouldn't feel judged.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't work. So I figured out other ways. I figured out other ways to do it, but I'd love to hear your take on setting and holding a standard with grace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is beautiful. So this, to me, is loving. It's loving communication mastery, which we all must do if we want to cooperate as a collective unit and family to architect, a new world. And unconditional love does not mean free reign. So it's, in my perception, I come at this from a very motherly, caring perspective. If my child is about to run into the middle of the street, I'm going to be firm and assertive, and I'm going to command them back to my presence because I love them. And so in these containers, I think there's a beauty in coming from love, but also with strength and conveying, these are my standards, and this is why this is valuable and important to me. It is out of a greater love, a greater reverence for me, for you, and for life as a whole, because that is always my come from. I'm always looking at what is in the peak quality, maximum resonance and goodness of all life, myself, all beings, and all that is. And that is the space and place that I decide from. And so presenting the holistic perspective in our dialogue, this is how I see this can be of service to all of us. And then allowing a being to choose, and their choice will personify and reflect where they are in their own evolutionary journey of self-reflection, of honest self-reflection, and their capacity to receive love. So if a being feels slighted by that communication, then they may not be fully ready to, 1, self-reflect with honesty, and 2, open to receiving the divine love that is available to them. So there's a closing off from love and a closing off of being honest with the self, because when we're honest with ourselves, there's an empathy that is birthed, right? Because it's an observatory awareness. Okay, these are my patterns, my habits, my constructs, my programs. And in that, having a neutral awareness of self, but then also pouring in the compassion and the empathy. So to me, those two things go hand in hand. And if a being isn't ready for that, they will shut out the communication. And that's okay. It's not up to us to pry them open to love. It's up to us to set them free to experience their journey and to open into that when they are in a space where they feel ready to step into their own next expansion. And so that's also beautiful for us because it lets us know who's ready to play in our playground and who's not. And that's freeing for everybody.
So, yeah, I definitely had some codependence I had to work through, and I think I was calling it empathy. So if people didn't like the standards and it hurt them, or they said that it hurt them because they wanted me to lower the standards, there was once upon a time I did. And I don't think it serves anybody in the long run.
Nope.
And so
certainly not.
Yeah, it there's a Coleridge poem where it finishes, and he was a sadder and a wiser man, and I feel like that's what plays to mind there. So it's it's beautiful to be able to land in that. I think there's some people fixing the pool.
I love the richness and the multidimensionality of our conversations. Yeah, I so deeply appreciate you.
Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate you as well, and I feel appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah, your depth of contemplation. I always feel this royalty and this stoicism to your energy. And it's just so evident how deep you go inside your own being. And I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start coughing. Someone asked me today what was something I was the most grateful for in life. And I went through some of the standard things that people say, and then I actually did say my depth. And so I appreciate hearing it from outside as well. I appreciate hearing it from you specifically. But it's I had a client yesterday say that they wanted to be more like me, and we worked together for a while, and I think that was something that built up in them. And we talked about what they meant. And I think what they mean is that depth, the fact that I find something to appreciate pretty much anywhere I go, the fact that I live in a way where it feels adventurous and heroic. If I'm going to the store to get carrots to juice, there's something that feels like a grand quest. And it's part of me that knows that it's ridiculous, and yet I love it. And it's interesting because the fact that I'm not hiding that there's a ridiculousness to it, I think allows people to play inside of that concept themselves.
Yeah.
And so they want to find their own flavor of it. I don't think they want to be me. But it was their way of saying that they appreciate how much I appreciate.
Yeah. I think that's brilliant. I think that's such a brilliant frame, right? Like we're all choosing our own adventure. And so, well, you know me, it's always been about like luxuriant, romantic, super abundant flourishing and like the adventure of the now. And that's my frame. And I love that you come at it from this like heroic quest. How beautifully masculine of you. I love it. And it's playful, it's fun, it gives us this frame upon which we can enter into every moment with vital, fresh eyes of wonder. Instead of it being a mundane act to go to the grocery store, it becomes this novel adventure.
And I'm not always there, but often. And I was listening to something Stephen Fry was talking about Greek mythology, and he shared this thing that just really stayed with me, and I think I played it back a few times. The word, like enthusiasm, right? The Greek version, enthusiasmos. And it has a different meaning than what I was used to. And so it closely translates to being engodded.
What? Can you say that again, please?
So enthusiasmos means to be engodded.
You think about the nature of spirituality, to be in spiritus, inspirited. It's a very similar notion. Yes. I'm like, that's like the orgasmic, the ecstatic nature of being engodded. Wow. Yes.
Yeah, to be filled with the divine. And because people have gotten all weird around sex and sexuality and gender roles and whatever, the idea of being penetrated by God as a man, right? You breathe in,
that's all I want to
do. You're like, where do I sign up? And as a dude, there's a certain amount of like that I was supposed to have. And yet, even as a straight man, if I just shake all that off and I look at the divine and being filled, being permeated with the divine is what art is to me. Right? Are you aware of the work of John Gottman at all? The Gottman Institute. They talk about relationships. It's really great.
No, but you are speaking my language. Let's keep it rolling.
So what John Gottman talks about, and I'm going to nerd it out just for a moment, and then I'll go back into So he talks about bids for connection and how the best relationships are ones where the bids for connection are met, and how often they're met, and how robustly.
Yeah.
And what I think differentiates art from squiggles of lines on paper or canvas or whatever is I think that art is a bid for connection with the divine. And the more deeply the person is doing that, they can call it whatever they want, but they're doing their version of being engodded. And so living a life from that place, I think, is the challenge.
And the invitation and the opportunity.
And the invitation. Yeah.
And the greatest treasurous reward. Just like that. Yes. When I'm in my priestess space, that's precisely what I'm doing. And I experience it is like, it's almost like the siphoning of Prometheus fire, where I'm just drawing from my I am presence into the core nucleus of my being. And that is my prayer. I welcome, saturate, bathe, permeate, fill, shower, bathe the fullness of my being and my vessel in the light and the quintessence of my I am presence. Like, saturate me. I welcome you. I invite you. And I feel that draw and that pulling it in. And that's the prayer, because with that comes everything. It comes total self-gnosis embodied and ultimate fulfillment. In my experience, precisely what you just spoke into, the greatest gem or jewel of reward, or as Rumi would say, you wander from room to room hunting for the diamond necklace that is already around your neck. The greatest diamond is the realization and experience of living in enthusiasm in every moment, no matter what we are doing or being or experiencing.
So I know you have a thing that you need to be in a few minutes.
Yes.
So really quickly, and this isn't fair because this is a big idea, but something that has been bouncing around in my head for a while is the misinterpretation of something that God through Jesus said. I am the way, the truth, and the light, and there's no way into heaven except through me. And that's been interpreted so often by people who are meant to be doing what you described, bringing the divine through them and serving it. And yet people try to position themselves as the gateway, right? The barrier, right? I am the voice piece of God. But what if it's to be interpreted as you saying it or me saying it, like repeat after me. I am the way, the truth, and the light, and there's no way into heaven except through me.
Yes.
And not that like I'm now suddenly anything other than me, nor do I have to be. And if I interpret the message that way, it makes sense to me. If I interpret it as I need to follow some rites and rituals that were made up and then changed and rewritten and all of these things, that doesn't make sense to me. But I am the way, the truth, and the light, and there's no way to heaven for me except through me and my experience. It ties into that integrity. So when I say which part of me am I honoring, my enthusiasmos, and my God spark. Did I land the plane there? I think so.
You totally did. And that's so epic. Thank you for that. That is it. There's so much beauty and richness and integrity in that. And you just tied a voluptuous velvet bow on this entire conversation. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
With enough time for you to be complete and get to your next engagement on time and keep your word.
Yes. Thank you for
Yes.
honoring the container also. I love you so much and appreciate you. And what a glorious way to, I love these focal points in consciousness where we converge with one another. It's always in my experience, it's always at the precipice of a next level, massive expansion, always. And yeah, I just treasure your presence.
And from very different angles. And that's what I love about it, because I think that there's more truth. If we were just quoting the same text in the same way, we can just be reciting something. But there's something where it's a Venn diagram of experience and appreciation. And yeah, love you too.
Yeah.
You go. We'll talk more soon.
Okay. Love you so much. Mwah.
Mwah.
Take
Bye.
care.